The saloon doors swung open with a violent crash, and Cyrus Blackwood dragged his daughter through the entrance like she was nothing more than a sack of grain. Daisy stumbled over the threshold, her rounded belly evident beneath her loose dress, her face streaked with tears and dirt. The afternoon crowd fell silent, whiskey glasses pausing midway to lips, card games forgotten as every eye turned to witness the spectacle unfolding before them. Cyrus Blackwood was known throughout the territory as a hard man, a successful rancher who ruled his land and his family with an iron fist. But today, his face was purple with rage and humiliation, and he seemed determined to share that humiliation with his daughter in the most public way possible. He shoved Daisy forward, and she nearly fell, catching herself on the edge of a table, while the men sitting there recoiled as if she carried plague. "Listen up, all of you," Cyrus bellowed, his voice carrying to every corner of the crowded saloon. "This here is my daughter Daisy, or I should say, this was my daughter. She's brought shame on the Blackwood name, gotten herself knocked up by God knows who, probably some drifter or saddle tramp. Well, I won't have it. I won't have her disgracing my home any longer." Daisy's sobs grew louder, her hands instinctively moving to protect her swollen belly. At 20 years old, she was a large girl, soft and round, in a time and place that valued hardness and angles. Her weight had always been a source of her father's displeasure, but her pregnancy had transformed that displeasure into outright hatred. She had tried to hide it for months, but eventually the truth could no longer be concealed. "So, here's what's going to happen," Cyrus continued, warming to his terrible purpose. "I'm selling her, right here, right now. Any man willing to take this burden off my hands can have her for the right price. She's strong enough for work, even if she eats more than her share. And whoever buys her gets the brat she's carrying too once it's born. I don't care what you do with either of them." The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Even in the rough and tumble world of the frontier, where women's rights were limited and justice was often arbitrary, this was shocking. To sell one's own daughter, pregnant and vulnerable, was an act of cruelty that tested even the flexible morals of the Wild West. Some men looked away in shame. Others leaned forward with interest, seeing opportunity in another man's desperate situation. Daisy wanted to die. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. The man she loved, the father of her child, had been driven away by threats and violence before she could even tell him about the baby. Kestrel, a Native American tracker who had worked seasonally on her father's ranch, had been gentle and kind, had seen past her size to the person she was inside. Their love had been a secret, stolen moments in the barn or by the creek, but it had been real. And now he was gone, and she was alone, carrying their child and facing public auction like livestock. "I'll start the bidding at $50, Cyrus announced. "Do I hear 50? Silence. Men shifted uncomfortably, studying their drinks or the ceiling, unwilling to meet Daisy's devastated gaze. $50 was a substantial sum, more than a month's wages for most of them, and while some might have considered taking advantage of a desperate situation, the sheer cruelty of it gave even the hardest men pause. "40 then," Cyrus said, his voice rising with desperation and rage. "Surely one of you wants a woman to cook and clean, even if she is used goods?" Still no response. Daisy's humiliation was complete. She was being sold, and no one even wanted to bid. She closed her eyes, praying for unconsciousness, for anything to end this nightmare. Then a voice spoke from the back of the room, quiet, but carrying clear authority. "I'll give you $30. It's all I have." Every head turned. A man stood in the shadows near the back door, tall and lean, with the weathered look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. He wore simple homespun clothes and carried himself with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. His face was handsome in a rough way, with high cheekbones and eyes that missed nothing. Those who recognized him knew him as Stone, a mountain man who came to town twice a year for supplies and otherwise kept to himself in the high country. Cyrus squinted at the stranger, clearly disappointed by the low offer, but also relieved to have any offer at all. $30? That's an insult. It's also all I have, Stone repeated, stepping forward into the light. And it's $30 more than anyone else is offering. Take it or leave it, but make your decision quick. I have a long ride back to my cabin, and I'd like to get started before dark. The two men stared at each other, wills clashing silently. Finally, Cyrus spat on the floor and held out his hand. Done. $30, and you take her out of here right now. I never want to see her face again. Stone pulled a worn leather pouch from his pocket and counted out coins, placing them one by one into Cyrus's greedy palm. When the transaction was complete, he turned to Daisy, who was staring at him with confused, terrified eyes. He approached slowly, as one might approach a frightened animal, and spoke in a voice low enough that only she could hear. "My name is Stone. I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not expecting anything from you, but we need to leave now before your father changes his mind or causes more trouble. Can you walk?" Daisy nodded mutely, too shocked to speak. Stone offered his arm, a gesture of courtesy that seemed absurdly out of place in the sordid situation, but she took it gratefully. Her legs were shaking so badly she was not sure she could have walked without support. As they moved toward the door, Cyrus called out one last time, his voice dripping with venom. "Don't come crawling back when you realize what you gotten yourself into, girl. You're dead to me now, you and that bastard you're carrying." Stone felt Daisy flinch beside him, felt her grip on his arm tighten. He paused at the door and looked back at Cyrus Blackwood with cold contempt. A man who would sell his own pregnant daughter is no man at all. You're the one who should be ashamed, Blackwood, not her. Then he guided Daisy out into the afternoon sunlight, away from the stares and whispers, toward his horse and wagon waiting at the hitching post. The fresh air seemed to revive Daisy slightly, and she drew in great gasping breaths, trying to calm herself. "Where are you taking me?" she finally managed to ask. "To my cabin, up in the mountains about 3 hours' ride from here," Stone said, helping her into the wagon seat. "It's isolated, but it's clean and safe. You'll have privacy there, time to rest and figure out your next steps. I promise you, I bought you to save you from that situation, not to take advantage of you. You have my word on that." Daisy studied his face, searching for the lie, the hidden agenda, but his eyes were steady and honest. She had no choice but to trust him, at least for now. She nodded and settled into the seat, her hands protectively cradling her belly. Stone climbed up beside her and took the reins, urging the horses forward. As they rolled out of town, Daisy looked back once at the saloon, at the life she was leaving behind. Then she turned her face forward, toward whatever uncertain future awaited her in the mountains. The journey into the high country was long and uncomfortable, but Stone proved to be a thoughtful companion. He stopped frequently to let Daisy rest and stretch her legs, offered her water and dried meat from his supplies, and made sure she was as comfortable as possible given the circumstances. He did not press her with questions or demands, seeming content to let silence fill the space between them. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, they climbed into country Daisy had never seen before. The air grew cooler and cleaner, scented with pine and wildflowers. The trail wound through dense forest, occasionally opening onto breathtaking vistas of mountain ranges stretching to the horizon. Despite her exhaustion and emotional turmoil, Daisy found herself captivated by the wild beauty surrounding them. "It's beautiful," she whispered, more to herself than to Stone. "It is," he agreed. "That's why I came here 10 years ago and never left. Too many people in the valley towns, too much noise and judgment. Up here, a man can live as he pleases, answer to no one but himself and God." "Aren't you lonely?" Daisy asked. Stone considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I've found loneliness is easier to bear than cruelty. People can be meaner than any wild animal I've encountered in these mountains." His words resonated with Daisy's own experience, and she felt a flicker of kinship with this strange man who had bought her freedom with his last coins. "Why did you do it?" she asked quietly. "Why did you help me?" Stone was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. "I had a sister once. She got in trouble, same as you, and our father threw her out. She died that winter, alone and desperate. I've carried that guilt for 15 years, wondering if I could have done something, should have stood up to our father. When I saw you in that saloon today, I saw her. I couldn't walk away. Maybe helping you is a way of making peace with what I failed to do for her." Tears filled Daisy's eyes again, but these were different tears, not of shame or fear, but of gratitude and sorrow for this man's loss. "I'm sorry about your sister," she said softly. "So am I," Stone replied. "But maybe something good can come from her tragedy if I can spare you from the same fate." As twilight deepened into night, they finally arrived at Stone's cabin. It was larger than Daisy had expected, built of solid logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. A barn stood nearby, and she could hear the lowing of a cow and the clucking of chickens. It was clear that Stone had built a real homestead here, not just a temporary camp. Stone helped Daisy down from the wagon and led her inside, lighting lanterns that revealed a surprisingly comfortable interior. The cabin was divided into 2 rooms, a main living space with a kitchen area and fireplace, and a smaller bedroom beyond. Everything was clean and orderly, the work of a man who took pride in his home. "You can have the bedroom," Stone said, already gathering blankets. "I'll sleep out here by the fire. There's a basin and water for washing, and I'll heat up some stew for supper. Tomorrow we can talk about what comes next, but tonight you just need to rest." Daisy wanted to protest, to say she did not deserve his kindness or his bedroom, but exhaustion was overwhelming her. She nodded gratefully and retreated to the small room, closing the door behind her. The bed was simple but comfortable, covered with hand-stitched quilts. She removed her shoes and dress, washing her face and hands in the basin, then crawled under the covers. As she lay in the darkness, listening to Stone moving quietly in the main room, Daisy placed her hands on her belly and felt the baby move, a small flutter that reminded her she was not alone, that she was carrying a piece of the man she loved. Kestrel was gone, driven away by her father's threats before she could tell him about the child. But the baby was real and growing, and somehow she would find a way to protect it, to give it the life it deserved. For the first time since her pregnancy had been discovered, Daisy felt a tiny spark of hope. She was safe, at least for now. She had a roof over her head and someone who had shown her kindness without expecting anything in return. It was more than she had dared hope for when her father had dragged her into that saloon. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Daisy woke slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, then remembered where she was and why. She dressed quickly and emerged from the bedroom to find Stone preparing breakfast with efficient movements. "How did you sleep?" he asked without turning around. "Better than I have in weeks," Daisy admitted. "Thank you for giving me your bed." "It's your bed now for as long as you need it," Stone said, setting a plate of food in front of her. "Eat up. You're feeding two, after all." Over breakfast, they talked more easily than the day before. Stone explained the rhythms of mountain life, the work that needed doing each day to maintain the homestead. Daisy listened carefully, understanding that he was offering her a role here, a way to contribute and feel useful rather than merely dependent. "I'm not expecting you to work like a field hand," Stone clarified, "especially not in your condition. But if you're comfortable with it, there are lighter tasks: cooking, tending the chickens, maintaining the garden. It's up to you." "I'd like to help," Daisy said quickly. "I don't want to be a burden, and honestly, I think I'd go mad with nothing to do but sit around thinking about everything that's happened." Stone nodded, understanding. "Fair enough. We'll take it slow, see what works. And Daisy, you're not a burden. Don't ever think that." Over the following weeks, Daisy settled into life at the mountain cabin. The work was physically demanding but manageable, and she found satisfaction in the simple routines of frontier life. Stone was an easy companion, quiet but not cold, respectful of her space and her need for privacy. He never asked about the baby's father or pressured her to share details of her past. Instead, he taught her practical skills: how to milk the cow, preserve meat, identify edible plants in the forest. As her belly grew larger and her pregnancy became more obvious, Daisy found herself thinking constantly about Kestrel. She had loved him deeply, had treasured their secret meetings and the way he looked at her with genuine affection. He was Lakota, raised between two worlds, his mother's people and the white settlements where he found work as a tracker. He understood what it meant to be judged for circumstances beyond your control, and he had never made Daisy feel less than beautiful, despite her size. When she had missed her monthly courses and realized she was pregnant, Daisy had been terrified, but also secretly thrilled. She had wanted to tell Kestrel, to share the news and plan a future together, but before she could find the right moment, her father had discovered Kestrel's presence on the ranch and correctly guessed the nature of their relationship. Cyrus had threatened to kill Kestrel if he ever came near the property again, and Kestrel, knowing the danger was real, had disappeared into the wilderness. Daisy had not seen him since, had no way of knowing where he had gone or if he even knew about the baby. The not knowing was almost worse than losing him, and she often cried herself to sleep, one hand on her belly, wishing Kestrel could feel his child move beneath her palm. Stone never intruded on her grief, but he was there when she needed to talk, a steady presence that asked nothing in return. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Daisy finally found the courage to tell him the whole story about Kestrel, about their love, about her father's threats, and Kestrel's forced departure. "He doesn't even know about the baby," she finished, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted to tell him, but there was no time, and now he's gone, and I don't know if I'll ever see him again." Stone listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he said quietly, "What if we could find him? Tell him about the child?" Daisy looked up in surprise. "How? He could be anywhere in the territory by now." "Maybe," Stone allowed, "but trackers have networks, places they gather, people who might know where he went. I know some of those places. If you want, I could make inquiries, see if anyone knows how to reach Kestrel." Hope flared in Daisy's chest, bright and painful. "You would do that? Why?" "Because that child deserves to know its father," Stone said simply. "And because you deserve the chance to build a life with the man you love, if that's what you both want. What I did in that saloon was give you freedom from your father's cruelty. But true freedom means having choices, having options. Finding Kestrel would give you another option." Daisy threw her arms around Stone in an impulsive hug, sobbing with gratitude. He patted her back awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with displays of emotion, but not unkind. When she finally pulled away, he smiled slightly. "I'll start asking around when I go for supplies next week," he promised. "No guarantees, but I'll do my best." 2 weeks later, Stone made the journey down to the settlements, asking careful questions at the trading posts and among the native communities that lived on the edges of white society. He mentioned Kestrel's name cautiously, describing him and explaining that someone needed to reach him with important news. At first, he learned nothing. Then, at a remote trading post near the border of Lakota Territory, an old trapper mentioned hearing of a tracker named Kestrel, who had been working for a mining company further north. The information was months old, but it was a lead. Stone followed it, riding for 3 days into country he had never explored. Finally, at a rough mining camp, he found someone who knew Kestrel and could point him toward the man's current location, a small native settlement tucked into a valley 50 miles east. When Stone finally tracked Kestrel down, he found a young man who looked haunted, aged beyond his years by grief and worry. Kestrel listened in stunned silence as Stone explained about Daisy's pregnancy, about what had happened in the saloon, about her current situation at the mountain cabin. "She's carrying my child?" Kestrel repeated, as if unable to believe it. "And her father sold her?" "He did," Stone confirmed, "but she's safe now and the baby is healthy. She thinks about you constantly, mourns your loss. If you want to see her, I can take you to her." Kestrel's face transformed with fierce determination. "I want to see her. I never stopped thinking about her, never stopped loving her. Her father threatened to kill me if I came near the ranch, and I couldn't put her in danger by defying him. But if she's away from there now, if there's a chance we could be together—" "There's a chance," Stone said. "But you should know, her father isn't going to let this go quietly. If he finds out you're back, there could be trouble." "Let there be trouble," Kestrel said fiercely. "Daisy is carrying my child. That makes her my responsibility, my family. I'll face whatever comes to protect them both." The journey back to Stone's cabin took 4 days, with Kestrel growing more anxious and excited with each passing mile. When they finally rode into the clearing where the cabin stood, Daisy was in the garden, her belly round beneath her dress, her face peaceful in concentration as she pulled weeds. She looked up at the sound of hooves and froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Kestrel?" she whispered, as if afraid saying his name aloud would make the vision disappear. Kestrel was off his horse and running before Stone could even dismount. He swept Daisy into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, murmuring her name over and over. Daisy clung to him, sobbing with joy and relief, her hands tangling in his long, dark hair. "You're here," she kept saying. "You're really here." "I'm here," Kestrel confirmed, pulling back just enough to look at her face, then down at her swollen belly. "May I?" he asked softly, his hand hovering over her stomach. Daisy nodded, and Kestrel placed his palm gently against her belly. As if responding to its father's touch, the baby kicked strongly, and Kestrel's face split into a smile of pure wonder. "Our child," he breathed. "Daisy, I'm so sorry I wasn't there, that you had to face your father alone." "You're here now," Daisy interrupted. "That's what matters. You're here, and we're together." Stone watched from a respectful distance, feeling both satisfaction and a touch of melancholy. He had helped reunite them, but now he would be alone again in his mountain refuge. Still, it was worth it to see the joy on their faces, to know he had helped create this moment. Over dinner that evening, they discussed the future. Kestrel wanted to marry Daisy immediately, to claim her and the child as his own in the eyes of both white and native law. But Stone raised a complication. "There's the matter of Daisy's inheritance," he said. "Her mother left her land, a good section with water rights. Cyrus has been holding it, claiming Daisy forfeited her rights when she brought shame on the family. But legally, that land is hers, and with a baby coming, you'll need resources. You can't let Cyrus keep what's rightfully yours." Daisy had almost forgotten about the land her mother had left her, too caught up in survival to think about property rights. But Stone was right. It was substantial land, worth fighting for. "How can we claim it?" she asked. "My father will never give it up willingly." "We go through the courts," Stone said. "File a claim with the territorial judge. Your mother's will should be on record, and there's no legal basis for your father to withhold your inheritance just because you got pregnant. It won't be easy, and Cyrus will fight it, but you have the law on your side." The following week, they made the journey to the county seat, a small town 3 days' ride from Stone's cabin. They hired a lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Chen, who had made a name for herself defending miners and homesteaders against corporate interests. When they explained the situation, her expression hardened with anger. "This is clear-cut," she said. "The inheritance is legally yours, Miss Blackwood. Your father has no right to withhold it, regardless of his personal feelings about your circumstances. We'll file a claim and request a hearing before Judge Wheeler. He's fair-minded and has little patience for men who abuse their daughters." But before they could file the claim, word reached them that Cyrus Blackwood had gotten wind of their presence in town and was coming with his own accusations. The confrontation happened in the courthouse square, with a crowd gathering to watch the drama unfold. Cyrus arrived with 2 hired guns and the local sheriff, his face purple with rage when he saw Daisy standing between Stone and Kestrel. "That's my daughter," he snarled, pointing at Daisy, "and that savage is the one who defiled her. Sheriff, arrest him for kidnapping and assault." "I never kidnapped or assaulted anyone," Kestrel said calmly, though his hand moved protectively to Daisy's shoulder. "I love Daisy, and she loves me. We're going to be married." "Over my dead body," Cyrus spat. "She's my daughter, my property, until she's married to someone I approve of. And I sure as hell don't approve of a half-breed tracker." "I'm not your property," Daisy said, finding her voice and her courage. "You sold me, remember? In a saloon like livestock. You said I was dead to you. Well, now I'm claiming what's mine, the land Mother left me, and the right to choose my own life." The sheriff looked uncomfortable, clearly not wanting to be caught between a powerful rancher and a pregnant woman claiming her rights. "Mr. Blackwood, did you actually sell your daughter?" "I sold her to him," Cyrus said, pointing at Stone. "Which means she's his property now, not mine, but she sure as hell can't marry this savage." "Actually," Stone interjected mildly, "I bought Daisy to free her, not to own her. As far as I'm concerned, she's a free woman with the right to make her own choices. And she chooses Kestrel." The argument might have continued indefinitely if Margaret Chen had not appeared on the courthouse steps. "Gentlemen," she called out, her voice cutting through the shouting, "this is neither the time nor the place for this discussion. We have filed a legal claim regarding Miss Blackwood's inheritance, and all parties are required to appear before Judge Wheeler tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I suggest you save your arguments for the courtroom." Judge Wheeler turned out to be a stern man in his 60s with a reputation for cutting through nonsense and getting to the heart of matters. When all parties assembled in his courtroom the next morning, he listened with growing impatience as Cyrus ranted about his daughter's shame and her involvement with a native tracker. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge finally interrupted, "I don't care about your personal feelings regarding your daughter's romantic choices. What I care about is the law. Your late wife left property to your daughter in a legal will. Do you dispute that?" "I don't dispute the will existed," Cyrus said sullenly. "But Daisy forfeited her rights when she got herself knocked up and brought shame on my family." "There's no legal precedent for inheritance forfeiture based on pregnancy," Judge Wheeler said dryly. "The property is Miss Blackwood's by law, and you are required to transfer the deeds to her immediately. Furthermore, regarding your claim that she is your property to dispose of as you see fit, I find that claim repugnant and legally baseless. Miss Blackwood is an adult woman with the right to make her own decisions about her life and her relationships." He turned to Daisy and Kestrel. "Young man, do you intend to marry this woman?" "I do, Your Honor," Kestrel said clearly. "I love her, and I claim both her and our unborn child as my family." "And you, Miss Blackwood? Is this your free choice?" "It is," Daisy said firmly. "Kestrel is the father of my baby, and I want to marry him more than anything." Judge Wheeler nodded. "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory, I declare you legally married. The property in question is hereby transferred to Mrs. Kestrel Blackwood, to be held jointly with her husband according to territorial law. Mr. Cyrus Blackwood, you are ordered to vacate any claims to the property and to cease any harassment of your daughter and her husband. If you violate this order, you will be held in contempt of court." The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Cyrus looked apoplectic, his face turning an alarming shade of red. "This is outrageous. You can't just marry her off to a half-breed savage." "I can, and I just did," Judge Wheeler said coldly. "And, Mr. Blackwood, if I hear you use that slur again in my courtroom, I'll hold you in contempt right now. This hearing is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, Daisy collapsed into Kestrel's arms, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. In the space of an hour, she had gained her inheritance, married the man she loved, and been freed from her father's control. It felt surreal, too good to be true. Stone approached them with a genuine smile. "Congratulations," he said, shaking Kestrel's hand. "You've got a good woman there. Take care of her and that baby." "I will," Kestrel promised. "And Stone, I can never repay what you done for us. You saved Daisy when no one else would. You tracked me down and brought us back together. You stood with us against her father. That kind of friendship is rare." "It's what family does," Stone said simply. "And you're family now, both of you. When that baby comes, I expect to be told, I want to meet my godchild." Tears filled Daisy's eyes as she hugged Stone tightly. "You'll always have a place in our lives," she promised. "Always." The following months passed in a blur of activity. Kestrel and Daisy moved on to her inherited land, which turned out to be even better than they had hoped. Rich soil, good water, and timber for building. With Stone's help, they constructed a sturdy cabin and began establishing their homestead. As Daisy's pregnancy advanced, both men fussed over her like mother hens, insisting she rest while they handled the heavy work. She submitted with good grace, spending her time sewing baby clothes and preparing their home for the child's arrival. When Daisy went into labor on a warm summer evening, both Kestrel and Stone were there, along with a midwife from the nearest native settlement. The labor was long and difficult, but when the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, the joy was overwhelming. They named him Riverstone Blackwood, honoring both the landscape they loved and the man who had saved his mother. Stone held his godson with surprising tenderness, his usual stoic expression softening into something almost paternal. "He's perfect," Stone said quietly, his finger gently clasped by tiny newborn hands. "You two did good." As autumn painted the mountains gold and crimson, the three adults worked together to prepare for winter, building up stores of food and firewood. They had become an unexpected family, Kestrel and Daisy, raising their son, Stone, visiting regularly from his mountain cabin, all of them bound together by loyalty and love rather than blood. One evening, as they sat around the fire watching baby River sleep in his cradle, Daisy reflected on how drastically her life had changed. A year ago, she had been a frightened girl in her father's house, her pregnancy a shameful secret. Now, she was a wife and mother, living on her own land with the man she loved, supported by friends who had become family. "What are you thinking?" Kestrel asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I'm thinking how grateful I am," Daisy said softly. "For you, for River, for Stone, for second chances and unexpected kindness. My father meant to destroy me when he sold me in that saloon, but instead he freed me to build the life I was meant to have." Kestrel pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Your father's cruelty couldn't touch who you really are. You're strong, Daisy. You always were. You just needed the space to show it." Stone raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To family," he said simply. "The one we're born with and the one we choose." They raised their own cups, the firelight dancing across their faces as baby River stirred and cooed in his sleep. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, blanketing the land in pristine white. But inside the cabin, warmed by fire and love, the unlikely family they had built together, prepared to face whatever challenges the future might bring. secure in the knowledge that they would face them together.